right. Hello and welcome to this conference hosted by MS Focus, the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation. I am your host, Aaron Fine, Social Media Marketing Coordinator for MS Focus. And I'm joined by Tiffany Malone, who will be spending the next hour discussing the importance of social connection in MS. Now, I am delighted to introduce our speaker. Tiffany Malone is the director of the John A. Schaefer, MD, Multiple Sclerosis Achievement Center, and has been with the program for over 9 years. She oversees the development of program curriculum and facilitation of activities and education to promote cognitive, physical, social, and emotional wellness for people living with MS and their loved ones. She has a master's of social work and is an MS specialist and has partnered with various MS organizations to provide education to people living with MS across the globe. After Tiffany's presentation, we will open it up to your questions and comments. Tiffany, we are so grateful that you're here tonight. I'm thrilled to hand it over to you now to kick off tonight's presentation.
Aaron, thank you so much. I am delighted to be back with the foundation and all of you. So thank you for spending your afternoon, evening, wherever you might be in the world today. I'm glad you're here. So let me share my screen with everyone. And hopefully everyone can see that, but Aaron, give me a indication if you cannot.
I can absolutely see it. You are good to go.
Perfect. Thanks, Aaron.
One thing, sorry.
Yes.
That is different than what we saw initially. So the slides are on the left and small, and then we can see notes on the right side. I'm not sure if that's what you wanted.
Try this again. Let's do it this way. Is that better?
Perfect. Yep. That's, I think,
Okay.
what you wanted.
Okay. All right. So this topic has become very near and dear to my heart over the last several months. And I'm going to start out by saying that the title of this says the importance of social connection in MS. And yes, we are going to talk about social connection and lots of information about that and how it ties into the diagnosis of MS. But I'm going to be upfront that this is something that affects everybody, no matter what your journey is and whether you have MS or not. But we will talk about how MS might play a more significant factor into the equation. So let me start off by saying that, you know, it's important for us to know about MS and to maybe educate others about MS, but that always can come, or that sometimes and maybe most of the time can come with some challenges because, yeah, we want to increase the awareness and the support for the MS community, but it can be exhausting. MS is a diagnosis that is confusing, that has various symptoms that come with it, that has a lot of variability, unpredictability. And so without having concrete information that is the same across the board, it becomes very challenging to educate others about it. And for those of you living with the disease, I don't know if we have support partners and loved ones with us, but for those of you living with the disease, it's a daily battle. You face obstacles, you face challenges, you face barriers, you face unwelcome changes. And so trying to educate people about all of that with that confusion and those barriers can become even more challenging. Telling the story would hopefully come with a sense of empowerment and connection. But oftentimes it really comes with, and the reality of it is that it comes with pain. It comes with confusion, loss, and seclusion. And for many of you, you may have experienced ridicule or skepticism because of your MS and trying to tell your story. And so you may shy away from or completely avoid it altogether because the general community can misunderstand the diagnosis, the treatment, the symptoms, and all that it entails. Let's see, I always have to figure out. There we go. So today's presentation is really intended to provide information regarding this epidemic of social isolation and loneliness in the United States. It's intended to give you information about the general population, but then also talk about how the risk factors might affect you as a person living with MS and perhaps with other risk factors. So my hope for today is that we'll tackle these objectives that are listed here. I want to define loneliness and social isolation for you. I hope that you learn other health concerns that may be related to social isolation. I hope that you learn strategies for staying connected and what that might look like and how that might be healthy and positive for you, and learn the value of community. And I want you to hold on to that word community because it's going to come into play throughout today's discussion. And then there'll be some questions about that at the end. So last year, the U.S. Surgeons Advisory put out a report on the epidemic of loneliness and isolation in the United States and the healing effects of social connection and community. The information provided in this report includes data that was collected from 2003 to 2020. And if we remember, 2020 was the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. So this data was collected before the pandemic. So as it's defined in this report, social isolation is objectively having few social relationships, social roles, group memberships, and infrequent social interaction. And loneliness is defined as a subjective internal state, including distress from perceived isolation or unmet needs. Okay. And as we discuss this further, I want you to keep in mind that social connection is a fundamental human need, much like the need for survival, for food, for water, for shelter, and we are biologically driven to connect with others. And as we think about how do we define social connection, how do we know if we have the right components? What are the components? This report lists that there are 3 vital components that we need to consider. First of all, the structure. We need to look at the number and the variety of relationships and the frequency of interactions. So how many social connections do I have in my day-to-day life? What is the makeup of those connections? Is there diversity to the relationships I have? How often do I experience those connections? And then there's the function, which is the degree to which relationship serves various needs. So you might ask yourself, why do these relationships exist for me? How are they serving me? How often, are they emotionally healthy and supportive? And then let's look at the quality, which are the positive and negative aspects of relationships and interactions. And again, asking yourself, how are these connections affecting me? And do I feel included or excluded? If we do not find purpose, or if we've had a negative interaction or experience with a social connection, we are going to be more likely to avoid it. We're going to say, no, I don't want to do that again. That didn't feel good. If a relationship feels like it's more work than it's worth, we're not going to engage with it. We're going to remove ourselves or limit our time in those relationships. We'll disconnect from it. And as we have more of those negative and unproductive interactions, there's an increased likelihood that we will isolate ourselves and avoid any connection at all. It's the domino effect. It's going to build on each other. The more the negativity, the less likely I'm going to engage. And it may be okay to do that in small, limited doses, But the health risks and the health concerns really come into play when it becomes a pattern of behavior and we get used to being disconnected. And that's where the concerns really start to affect us. So I'm going to throw some numbers at you here for the next couple of slides, but it's really meant to give you the background as to why this is such an issue and why this has become so important to discuss, not just in the MS population, but in the community at large. So the graphs that are listed here may be a little bit difficult to read, but ultimately what they're showing are trends in social networks and social participation for Americans during that 17-year period of 2003 to 2020, showing that there's an increase in social isolation and a decrease in all social engagements, including connections with family, with friends, with household members, and with others. Outside of that 17-year period, so dipping a little bit into into the pandemic, demographic trends show that the percentage of Americans living alone has increased from 13% in 1960 to 29% in 2022. That the percentage of Americans who belong to a church, mosque, or synagogue has decreased from 70% in 1999 to 47% in 2020. That the percentage of Americans who felt they could reliably trust other Americans decreased from 45% in 1972 to 30% in 2016. And a study in 2022 found that only 39% of Americans felt connected to others. 39%. That's a big deal. That's something to really reflect on. So why do we care about this? Well, there's an impact, and it's a negative impact. The severity of the impact of social isolation is that loneliness and social isolation have significant ramifications in that they increase the risk for premature death by 26% and 29% respectively. And in fact, the lack of social connection puts a person at a higher risk for premature death than obesity, excessive drinking, physical inactivity, and smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day. And again, there's a lot of information on this slide, but let me try to break it down a little bit. So I mentioned before that there are several health and wellness concerns related to social isolation. Many of them are listed here. There's a significant increased risk of heart disease and stroke, hypertension, diabetes, and dementia. It increases the susceptibility for infections and weaker immune responses. It accelerates cognitive decline and worsens the symptoms of depression and anxiety. And in fact, it can exacerbate the symptoms that a person might experience if they already have a diagnosis of hypertension, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, etc. When a person feels isolated, when they've gotten comfortable in that feeling, you're less likely to go to the doctor. You're less likely to follow through with treatment plans. You're less likely to make those routine appointments that are so important for any diagnosis. So those symptoms and those diseases can progress much faster with isolation. The lack of social connection can also have a significant financial impact. So social isolation has affected older adults specifically, with Medicare expenses being tremendously higher for that older population, with more frequent utilization of hospitals, more admissions to nursing facilities. Lower income adults have higher rates and feelings of isolation and loneliness than higher income adults. And social isolation is associated with lower academic achievement and poor work performance. So what do we need to consider? What do we need to know? How do we build social connection? Where there's levels on an individual basis, in relationships, within our community, and as a society as a whole. And changes to any one or more of these categories will impact social connectedness and may result in feelings of loneliness or isolation. And again, temporary feelings of isolation and loneliness can be okay, but it's that extended period and habitual time in isolation that becomes a challenge and becomes a concern. So the National Institutes of Health defines these factors as social determinants of health and states that they can be more important than healthcare and lifestyle choices in influencing health. And especially true for the MS population, cumulative exposure to social and environmental stressors have a negative effect on the general and brain health as a person ages. So it is vital, it is imperative that we have a variety of positive relationships, of healthy experiences in our community, with each other, and as a society. So if that wasn't overwhelming enough, and if we haven't learned anything or enough about those risk factors, then there's some additional barriers. So again, it's important to know that anybody can experience loneliness and isolation, but these barriers will increase the risk factor. As a person that's living with MS, you know that MS unfortunately is not the only box that you check when you fill out the medical form. You may have heard me say that time and time over. And I will continue to say that because there are other health concerns that may come up. And it's important to know that because MS doesn't exclude you from all of these other risk factors and health concerns. So you may experience disability because of your MS. You may experience disability for other reasons. That absolutely becomes an additional barrier, an additional risk factor for isolation and feelings of loneliness. Disability can be the limiting factor in getting to those appointments. It also can be the limiting factor in engaging with others, going to social events. I hear oftentimes from our members at the Achievement Center that I may limit myself in going to social engagements because I don't know the environment, or I do know the environment well enough to know that it doesn't accommodate my needs, my physical needs. How am I supposed to go to the bathroom? How am I supposed to get my wheelchair in the facility or in the home? So it's just, quote unquote, easier to say no and avoid those interactions. If we start to check other boxes on that health form, then we have more and more health concern. We have more and more to think about to take care of ourselves. And we may feel like we don't feel good and we don't want to go out and engage with others because I'm having a bad MS day, or my diabetes is out of control and I haven't been able to get it managed, or I'm just clearly not feeling okay. For physical and mental health. This is why we talk about mental health. This is why we talk about these social connections. This is why we talk about feelings and emotions, because when I'm not feeling good, when I'm feeling depressed or anxious, I'm again more likely to say no to things I need to do, things I want to do, et cetera, et cetera. Financial security can lead to isolation and disconnection. I don't have the money to go out and engage in those social opportunities. I may not even have the money for my copay for my doctor's appointments, which can limit that. Maybe I live alone and I've gotten used to being alone, and it might be scary. I might have fear of going out, and so I avoid them altogether. And single parents and younger and older adults also have additional risk factors. So again, this is a domino effect. The more that we pile on, the more barriers that we have, the higher risk we are for isolation and social disconnection and additional health concerns. I'm going to go back to financial insecurity for a second and also comment on MS is a very expensive disease. And so we know that it can be very challenging to maintain treatments. It can be very challenging to maintain those appointments of infusions, lab work, MRIs. Again, because I have to pay for the transportation. I have to figure out the transportation. I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for those appointments. And so that can really be a limiting factor. And those limitations and that disconnection from treatment can lead to progression of the disease, as it can with other disease states. Okay, so I sound like the Debbie Downer right now, but here's some other at-risk populations to consider. A statement that was released last year by the Consortium of Multiple Sclerosis Centers regarding the issues of diversity and equity and inclusion recognize that people living with MS are and have these or in these other populations have additional risk factors. So people from ethnic and racial minority groups, the LGBTQ+ community, those living in rural communities, victims of domestic violence, and those who have experienced discrimination all have additional risk factors that lead to isolation and disconnection. A survey that was conducted between 2003 and 2020 found that Black individuals and older adults are more likely to be isolated than white or Hispanic individuals. And again, this is all data that was collected prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Individuals from these populations will actively limit their exposure to the hatred, punishment, dismissiveness, harassment, and harsh treatment that they may have experienced in the past. So then let's fast forward and talk about 2020 and beyond and the COVID-19 pandemic. And a time period that created the requirement of isolation, social distancing, masking, and significantly reduced connections with others through lockdowns and stay-at-home orders. As a society, we experienced feelings of anxiety, fear, grief, anger, stress, and pain. Many of the gatherings and celebrations that we would have participated in were canceled. Relationships were strained due to the lack of connection. And those that may have already been strained have been strained further. And maybe even more significantly disconnected since that time. And even though technology has been helpful, is how we're all here today together, it has come with its own challenges. There's screen fatigue, there's less in-person engagement, and at that time, no in-person engagement. There's the feeling that there's a reduction in the quality of interaction. Maybe we're not as engaged with one another on screen as we would normally be. Screen time can monopolize our attention and take us away from other things that we could or should be doing. And it also has led to things like cyberbullying and decreased feelings of belonging. And again, although I want to recognize that there's been a lot of positive outcomes from this use of technology, there have definitely been some increased challenges and setting us up for the opportunity for increased disconnection if we allow it. So if we think back to the U.S. Surgeon General's advisory, I want us to remember that all of that data, or a majority of that data, was collected prior to the pandemic. With forced restrictions and increased levels of anxiety and fear that came from that pandemic, those feelings could have increased for us. And maybe we're still holding on to those. I know several people who are still isolated because of COVID, because of the pandemic, and are still fearful for coming out of their home and exposing themselves to the potential of any type of infection. So having said all of that, we know that the pandemic has only made this worse and made that information from the U.S. Surgeon General even more substantial. So now let's get into the discussion about what do we do. And I asked you to hold on to that word community. It's clear to us now, hopefully, that ignoring the societal risk factors of isolation, specifically for those living with MS and other risk factors, will have a substantially negative impact on our disease outcome. We also know that it's nearly impossible for a healthcare provider to address all of the social determinants that have been included throughout this discussion during an appointment with one of their patients. I would suspect that all, or at least most of you, have never had an opportunity where a medical provider has asked you, how do you stay connected with others? That's probably not on the list of questions in the healthcare community when you have such a short period of time with your provider. So they're probably not checking in on you. So it might be easy to get away with it. And our hope, at least in the MS professional community, is to really educate that population to talk about this with their patients. Would love for that to go even broader, because again, this is an epidemic and we want this to be a discussion. We want the word community to be in people's vocabulary. We want this to be part of the healthcare treatment plan. So what do? We build community. And community, according to the Oxford Dictionary, is defined as a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. A feeling of fellowship with others. So I want you to take a second, maybe a minute, and think about that word and think about that definition. And ask yourself, how do you feel? How do you define community? What does that look like for you? And I'm going to ask you to answer some of those questions in just a moment. But for right now, start to think about how community looks and feels to you. Ideally, in a healthy, positive environment and world, we would be connected to at least 3 or 4 communities. And what are some examples of communities? Perhaps you're part of a book club. Perhaps you're part of a coffee clutch. Perhaps you're part of a gym or a religious organization. There's lots of examples of community. It's really up to you to define what that is for you, but it is that feeling of commonality, of safety, of security, of trust, and a sense of healthy belonging. A sense that you are having productivity in a positive, healthy way with another individual or group of individuals, that it's working for you, not against you. And I really like this quote, and I want you to think about this before I start to ask you a couple of questions. So get ready to start typing some answers. Since the world is round, there is no way to walk away from each other, for even then we are coming back together. And as I have had plenty of time to reflect on this quote, it makes me and reminds me that we're not alone, and that we might take a pause. We might take a break. We might step away from engagement from time to time. Again, in small doses from time to time, and not make that habitual, not make that a habit, and make that our lifestyle. Because we will find each other when we come out of that break, when we come out of that timeout. And those timeouts and breaks are really important because it gives us a time to reflect. It gives us a time to gather more information. It gives us a time just to completely disconnect and not have to think about anything for a period of time, but then to come back to it and figure out, why did I need that time for disconnection? Why did I need that time and space for myself? Was it to recharge? Was it to reassess? Was it to gather more information so I can come back and engage fully or more productively? Was it a time to evaluate, do I need to shift gears? Am I going down the wrong path? Am I going down the path that is not productive for me, that's not working for me? And I need to shift over and focus on something else that's more engaging, that's more suitable for me, where there's a give and take. And I feel like I'm coming away from that experience a better person, or feeling more positive, feeling recharged. So let me take a pause because I see there's some stuff. I don't know how to address making that bigger. I apologize. Well, hopefully you guys are able to see that on your own, but I do not know how to make that larger. So I apologize for that. Okay, so now it's your turn. I want to hear from you. If you were to sit and count how many communities you feel that you are a part of or that you are connected with, what would that number be? And you can go ahead and type that into the chat box. Okay, 1, 2, 0. Okay, we're going to talk more about that. 2, 3, 4. A lot of 2s, okay. And again, this is anything that you feel like you get connection with, that you have those positive experiences, that it's a healthy experience, and it can be a community of 1, it can be a community of 1,000. So a fair amount of 1s. I see. Okay, someone said that they're in an online, I think, book club is what that's saying. And that's okay. Again, community is how you define it, and that feeling of fellowship and connection. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person. It can absolutely be online if you are finding connection and you are finding positive experiences with those communities. Again, technology can work against us in some cases, but there's a lot of positive aspect to that online community. and that ability to connect with others when we can't do that in person. I see a couple people with 5s. That's fantastic. I'm very happy to see that and hear that. So keep those numbers coming in, but now let's talk about what they look like. So what types of community, what examples do you have of those communities that you feel part of? And again, you can type those into the chat box. So there was the example of the book club that was already made. Oops. That's not what I'm trying to do. There we go. Family. Oh, support groups. Yes, I know many people across the globe are part of a variety of support groups, and those can absolutely be beneficial for you, both as a person living with MS and others. We have work and family and friends and wellness programs, religion, church. Oh my goodness, you guys, I can't even keep up. There's so many. Online weight management, family members, specific family members. Yes, sometimes that's very important. It's not all family, it's very specific family. I've learned that a lot talking with our members at the Achievement Center, that family can be both a positive experience and a major stressor. So it's important to know how they affect us in any capacity. Friends, support groups, high school reunion. I love that. Volunteer work, fantastic. The neighborhood, a board games group. Oh my gosh, that sounds like fun. Wheelchair support, more neighborhood support. I think that might be a reading group. So you might now think about if your number has changed now that you have heard from others about what their community looks like, about how they identify community. And for those of you who feel like you have very limited number of community interactions, I'd love for you to reflect on how they're working for you and if it's enough for you at this point, or if you would like to engage further. And how do we do that? Well, perhaps we think about what our personal goals are and our health goals. How can I better manage my health and wellness? Are there opportunities of engagement that perhaps I've been missing, or I've said no to? Someone just went from a 0 to a 4. Look at that. I love that. And thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you sharing that with us. Because it's important that we recognize that there are connections and that there are communities that we're part of. And sometimes we miss that because the negativity of the diagnosis of MS, of the pandemic, of this epidemic that you've now learned about, all of that can be so overwhelming that we want to disconnect. I don't want to put myself out there because look at all of this negativity in the world. I don't want to engage with that. So remember that it's not about necessarily the quantity that's within your community. The important part is the quantity of communities, and most importantly, the quality. Interestingly enough, I have not seen, I don't think, unless I missed it, I didn't see any part of our healthcare system that we consider to be part of our community. And that's interesting because that can be a healthy connection. That can be a positive connection. Yes, at times, and probably pretty overwhelmingly at times, it can have a negative impact on our emotional wellness to find out that there's a diagnosis or a progression of a particular diagnosis or another treatment that we have to consider. But ultimately, it can be at times, and when we allow it to be, a positive experience. I love how people's numbers are going up. This is fantastic. Tripping over my own 2 feet can be limiting. Absolutely. Absolutely. And if you are someone like the person who commented here that you used to have more and that it doesn't feel like enough right now, what I would ask for you to do is reflect on what's missing and are there any opportunities to engage in something that I really enjoy or used to enjoy, even though it might look a little bit different. Oftentimes that negativity and those negative connections and those negative impacts come from that feeling of I used to. Yes, there are significant limitations to living with MS. Absolutely. And I completely understand and respect that it doesn't look the same today as it did before. However, what disservice are we doing to ourselves by limiting those connections and those potential engagements by saying, well, I'm not going to do it if it's not like it used to be. Changes in the family dynamic. Perhaps you went from having kiddos at home to now being empty nesters. We saw in one of the previous slides that that is an additional risk factor. That your family situation change can have a negative impact. That negative impact can be temporary if we allow it. And if we engage with what is right now and what it looks like right now and work with it rather than focusing on what it used to be. Not to discredit what it used to be, not to dismiss what it used to be, but to allow ourselves to say, okay, this is what it is right now. And how can that work in my favor? How can I make that turn into something positive that initially felt like overwhelming, filled with grief, perhaps even with pain, with solitude? I don't have the same people in my life as I used to. How can I shift those gears and focus on the people that are in my life or that want to be in my life? I see some other answers coming in. Being connected to local nonprofits, fantastic. Again, more family. And yes, the used to statement, absolutely. I know that we all use it. I know that it exists. My hope is that it exists less and has less of an impact because it takes us away from the focus of what we have right now. And so my hope is that you will start to see and even build community with more and more confidence that there is the opportunity and the potential for positivity and healthy engagements. And when we allow ourselves to have that language in our head, then we can open up those doors and reconnect. And back to that, I'm going to go back to this slide here, this image, if I can, maybe I can't. But that image of the world with everybody around it. And that at some point, if I allow myself, I'm going to bump into somebody else. I'm going to be able to re-engage with somebody if and when I allow myself to do that. And yes, the used to language can inhibit our ability to have self-confidence. It's telling us that what we have right now isn't enough. It's telling us what I have right now isn't the right stuff. But I may not be able to control some of that. And so what do I do with it? I look to other people who are going through similar situations. Or perhaps I want to put, maybe I want to put MS to the side. I say that in quotes. put that to the side for a minute and focus on something I really enjoy doing. Years ago, the MS Achievement Center started a book club. And I had so many participants in that book club tell me I used to read and I stopped because MS, there were so many challenges that I was faced with living with MS and reading and comprehending and keeping up with the story and remembering what I read, that I stopped going to book club and I stopped reading altogether. I believe I started that book club in 2015. It might have been 2016, and it still exists today. And today I still have participants say, I love the book club because it's okay if I misspoke about the book, if I misremembered, or if I didn't finish the book, I'm still connected to the group. I'm still connected to the discussion in some way. At every book club, there's someone who didn't read the book. There's someone who couldn't remember what happened, and we're all still okay. And we have a fantastic discussion, and it's one of my favorite things to participate in. And yes, there are ways to accommodate things like reading. We might listen to audiobooks and we might have more success to that. So that's just one example of a community that perhaps you were part of prior to your diagnosis and that you haven't tried again. But maybe finding a group that speaks to you and your ability and your level of participation that might be more healthy and productive. So again, I ask you to think, and you can chat this in, or you can just think about it to yourself, but did that number change at all? And maybe it didn't, but could that number change? That number that you of communities that you identify with right now, could that change? Would you allow yourself the opportunity to explore other options, other engagements? So I'll leave you with that. And I will open it up for any questions that you might have. And you can type them into the chat box. I'm not sure, Erin, if we can open it up to live questions, but if that's a possibility, I'm happy to do that too.
Absolutely. Tiffany, first off, that was extremely eye-opening, especially the insight into the health concerns that come from social isolation. That really kind of struck a chord with me. That is incredible, the fact that like how much connection means to people physically and mentally. So thank you for sharing such powerful insights tonight. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
As Tiffany says, we are ready for questions. If you do have a question or comment, you can ask it using the Q&A button in the app, which will also allow you to send your question anonymously if you choose. You can also ask your question live by clicking the raise hand button or press *9 if you're using the phone. Once I call on you, you'll be able to unmute to ask your question. And so let's open it up. And we actually had somebody a while ago raise their hand. Her name is Jacqueline. I'm going to unmute you, Jacqueline, and you can ask your question or provide your comment to Tiffany. Here we go. All right.
Looks like Jacqueline's muted still, so I don't know.
Yeah.
So Jacqueline, there you go.
There we go. Let's see what we do.
I was just trying to answer the questions, and for some reason or another, I couldn't send the questions when you were asking about the social medias that we were that we could participate in, and I had 3, and I also wanted to answer some of the other questions, but I just couldn't get it together.
No worries. Well, share with us some of your examples of those 3, if you would.
I go to, I'm actually involved in 3 different support groups.
Fantastic.
Yeah. One is a swim group, and 2 meet socially, which we do different arts and crafts, and we do the reading online and so forth. So that helps tremendously. I really enjoy that.
Absolutely. I love that, Jacqueline. Thank you so much for answering those questions. I think it reminds us individually what we're part of, and then it helps other people maybe look at other ways that they might get connected. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Please type them in the Q&A portion of the Zoom, or you could put it in the chat. We are open for business.
And I see that someone commented that they have participated in the paint-alongs with the MS Foundation. So, and had really positive experiences with that. So, and looks forward to doing that again. So if you didn't know that, FYI, I think most Mondays, right, Aaron, is the paint-alongs?
Yeah, absolutely. MS as art. Oh yeah, MS art as therapy, excuse me. Every
Yeah.
Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Heather Garrison. And this week we are doing doodles. So yeah, you still have some time to register. If you'd like, you can just go on our social media, and there will be links available for you to click and come join us. They're super fun and super therapeutic. And I honestly have done it a couple of times, and I am thrilled that we have such a great recurring audience for that. And I think it's such a wonderful asset to everyone in the MS Focus community. So Anita
Absolutely.
has a question. Ideas of where to find online clubs or support groups?
That's a great question. So I know that the national MS organizations, such as the MS Foundation, the National MS Society, have lists of those support groups. And you can give them a call, send them an email. I think you guys all have chat available too, that you can ask what are some support groups that might be close to me, or some online groups that maybe you can be, you don't even have to be in the same area. The other thing is that I'm a love-hate person with Google. So yes, Google can be dangerous. Don't go down that slippery slope, but it can be helpful in finding things like if you're wanting to get connected in other aspects of life, that it doesn't have to just be about MS. So there are support groups for all kinds of life experiences. So if you're part of social media, that's a great place to start in looking for, groups about grief, or groups about board games. I saw someone who was in a board game group that are in my area, and you might have some people chime in and let you know that there's something available right in your backyard. And ultimately, people are your best recommenders, if you will. So start letting people know that you're looking for something. And it's amazing how you'll find out that even people that might be part of your social circle are already engaged or connected with some of those organizations. So it's always good to phone a friend, if you will.
I actually had a question. Now, is there any sort of like social apps that you would recommend where people can kind of connect via this app community that's based specifically for those with MS?
Social apps. That is a great question, Aaron. I, off the top of my head, don't. Most of the apps, especially related to MS, are more about tracking symptoms and tracking different parts of your health care. As far as staying connected, I don't, but if anyone has any ideas, I would love for you to add that into the chat box, because I would like to learn just as much as everybody else.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. If anybody has any insight into that, please let us know. I think that'd be a great option.
And I
so
see
we do
that
have a couple
Mary
more.
has, yeah,
Oh,
I
I'm
see
so sorry to
Mary
cut you
gave,
off.
no, I just see that Mary offered an idea about connecting with the local library. Yes, community centers are a fantastic place to go to. And again, if you're looking for online, it's important, it can be beneficial to connect with them and ask, are they offering any virtual stuff?
It looks like we have an answer. It's called Bezzy.
Bezzy.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sherry.
All right, Sherry, everyone's gonna go check out Bezzy. I gotta know what this is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hopefully it's got more than 4 stars. So we also have a couple comments. Arletha says that she participates in the yoga classes every Monday with MS Focus, which is awesome. I highly recommend that for other people to, gain a little bit more flexibility, and it's also very therapeutic. You can also check that on our social media or our website. I don't think you even need to register. You literally can just get the link to join. So we also have Stephanie participates with Chair Pilates once a month with MS Views and News. That's awesome. Chair Pilates is great. We also have Chair Yoga. And I think actually that's what you were talking about. Yeah, absolutely. So the yoga class is actually Chair Yoga. So that's the same thing. Okay, so let's keep going down here. Anita's asking, do you know of Facebook MS groups?
So I believe you guys have one, don't you, Aaron?
I do. Yeah, I would see if you knew any other options. But yeah, we absolutely have MS Facebook groups. You can go to our Facebook site right now, and then there's going to be a tab where you can go to groups, and then there's the official MS Focus Facebook group that has tens of thousands of like-minded individuals within the MS community. It's run by our health liaison, Sherry Binns, who not only, unfortunately, is afflicted with MS, but she is a nurse, and she gives great advice, and she runs a wonderful group. We also have more niche groups as well that you can check out. I highly recommend going to our Facebook channel and then being able to check those out from there.
And it looks like somebody, I can't see the full name, but someone else said Dealing with MS Together is another Facebook group. So that might be something to check out. Let me put out a disclaimer, especially for online groups and, groups that you might be new to. Make sure that they're make sure that they're working for you in a healthy, positive way. And then that you feel like you had a productive experience. If it's not working for you, that's when you disconnect from it and you find something else. Please don't stick with something that is just bringing you down or that has a bunch of negativity to it. So all of this is great as long as it's working for you in a healthy, positive manner. So that's my disclaimer.
So Dawn is asking, what is your Facebook channel? Do you have a Facebook channel?
We don't have social media at all. So I think I don't have a Facebook channel. Now the MS Foundation has a YouTube channel that they where they store their recordings of sessions such as this one. So that might be maybe it was misspoke, but no, I don't think
I think she's asking specifically about MS Focus, our Facebook channel. So if you actually facebook.com/multiple sclerosis foundation, you should be able to locate us.
So it looks like in the chat, there's a couple other apps that might be helpful for people, My MS Team and Belong MS. And let me put out my other disclaimer. It doesn't all have to be about MS. Go find something else. Your MS is just one part of you. So go find other things that you can enjoy and engage in and be a part of, so that you don't feel like MS is the only part of your life. It's all about the balance.
I concur with that. We've got another app, Belong MS. Thanks, Mary. That's really helpful. We really appreciate that. And also, like we've all been saying, do a little bit of research, kind of get a little sense of like the reviews on them, and also at the end of the day, like Tiffany's been saying, not every app or group is going to fit everyone. It's not one size fits all. So, just basically do a little research and try it out. And at the end of the day, there's enough out there, thankfully, that one's going to, be able to, be the one that you utilize on more than more or less, here and there. And my MS buddy. Now, do we have any? So we only have like 2 minutes left. I'm wondering from our audience, does anybody have any specific questions regarding the presentation that we want to kind of wrap up the session with?
Mary, you're very connected on the apps. I love it. I'm
Mary's
gonna have to
killing
get all of these.
This is amazing. Oh boy. Oh,
Okay.
and we got
Let's see
okay.
here.
Kelly, basically, all right, here we go. So Jacqueline does have a question regarding the presentation. Is
Okay.
there a print version of this that she could view at a later date?
So Erin, how do you guys work it? Do you share the slides at any point?
Not generally. So from what we generally do, Jacqueline, is we're going to have this presentation on our Facebook feed immediately after this completes. So like as soon as you get off of this Zoom, you can go to our Facebook page and it's going to be there for you to view. It's also going to be available within 2 weeks' time on our YouTube channel. However, I would like to point out that if Tiffany is okay with sharing her slides, then we could potentially email them to you.
Yeah, that's fine. You have my permission.
Wonderful. Okay.
So Jacqueline, I think we just got you what you need.
Fantastic. So Jacqueline, what I would need from you is an email, and you could please send it to awareness@msfocus.com. Okay, and we can also respond to your yeah. Okay, that's totally fine. We can also there's a bunch of ways we can do this. How about we do this? Jacqueline, please send your email stating that you'd like this in print to awareness@msfocus.com, and we will email those over to you. And that goes for everyone else here who would like a print version of this. We would be very happy to send that over to you. And with that being said, it looks like we have come to the end of our presentation. So that if you missed any part of this conference, like I said, it has been recorded and will be available through the MS Focus Facebook and YouTube channels. Please reply to your registration email for info on how to access recordings or sign up for our newsletter to learn about upcoming events. Our next teleconference is Tuesday, August 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern. Doctors Adam Chaffetz and Ashley Sargent will be our guest hosts for our event, MS Care is a Team Approach. As you leave the conference today, a survey will appear on your screen. We ask that you take a moment to give us your feedback on this program and your suggestions for future topics. Our hope is to always provide you the best and most meaningful programs possible. Our sincere thanks to all of our attendees for your participation. Lots of participation today. I'm so happy that everyone responded and was a part of the presentation. But I would like to also especially give thanks to Tiffany Malone, who continually takes time out of her busy schedule to help educate all of us. So with that being said, goodbye, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.